I'm Robyn, and we've got the lovely and talented Stephen Robinson also for Wonkette semi-live today because, yeah, we're not actually live again because Stephen has to do road trip stuff, and it is my birthday, which means that you all have to send me some lovely gifts, I'm sure. I'll figure out my Amazon wish list or something like that. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. So, Stephen, why don't you kick us off?
Yes. Happy birthday, Robyn. Thank you for being here. We are a few days apart, so
Yes.
and several years. But yeah, week has been an interesting week. There was the whole Johnny Depp Amber Heard case, which a lot of the worst people in the world are very happy about the verdict. I it's interesting. So a lot of times I am not necessarily tuned into something or openly interested in something, and then I remember a lot of folks, mostly white guys, would be very dismissive of why anyone cares about this topic.
Yeah.
And just sort of, well, just ask, because for me, it's like, oh, it seems like a lot of women I know and respect are very upset by what's going on. Why don't I read what they're saying or ask them before making it out to be like, why are you worried about the downfall of
There's always the option of keeping your mouth shut, which like I feel like a lot of people just like don't respect. My general rule is like I actually do keep my mouth shut until I feel like I know enough about something to have a take. Sometimes, it's a thing that you can, have a quick hot take on, but something like this is very complicated and you should probably know more before you open your mouth, is my belief. That's why I actually haven't talked that much about this, because I'm like, this feels like a very like complicated thing that I don't know enough about. Like I understand it, but I haven't like done any big, it hasn't been a deep dive for me. So I'm not, ranting about it on Twitter 24/7 because I leave that to people who know more.
The legality and the whole legal exercise and legal issues are going on. Beyond that, I think it was fascinating to see such a lot of men being very angry and resentful toward Amber Heard. A lot of misogyny was there that it felt like some of the worst people in the world are very happy again, as I said, about the result.
Well, I think there was definitely we're going to take out all of our anger on women in the world on this one woman because we can situation. And that never leads to anything good.
Yeah. And from what, again, the little I had been following, or I started to read a bit more about what was going on. And it interesting to me, what stuck out to me is this idea that, oh, Amber Heard might have said mean things to Depp or punched him around or been abusive, because that's almost sort of a microcosm of the larger sense that whenever there's police violence after the latest police shooting, it's always taking in a vacuum. It's like, well, there have been previous police shootings and it doesn't just go away. Like the anger continues to build, and then you might get a riot, or you might even get a very unpleasant protest, or with the Supreme Court, when you start to take away people's bodily autonomy, maybe they get real mad. Might come up to you in a supermarket or something, or protest outside your nice.
Well, like never being a good enough victim. Like if you were a good victim, you would be appropriately meek, and otherwise it doesn't really count.
Yeah, it does seem an American system, like, and even, I mean, unfortunately, obviously I knew Republicans would try to exploit what happened with George Floyd's murder, and then later go on the defensive with Roe v. Wade ending. But the degree to which moderates, a lot of Democrats, seemed unprepared for the anger. So they would be like, oh, well, you know, write a firm, stern letter to the editor when you see someone shot in the streets by cops or murdered. And then later, your bodily autonomy is going away. Go give us some more money for some long shot Senate races in Kentucky. And then when that doesn't happen, they just have no awareness of the activism or so forth. So it is that sense of always wanting the perfect victim. So among some of those worst people in the world being very excited about this verdict, Kyle Rittenhouse apparently believes that will help him. That's like the precedent now.
Yes.
Because he'd wanted to file some defamation suits, including the president, for people who had said that he was in a militia or had murdered someone, because he didn't technically murder anyone. It was self-defense, and on and on. And that's has hurt his incredibly productive career. As others have pointed out, like even with Johnny Depp, it's like, well, you haven't really done any good work in years. It's going to be hard. That was sort of one of the legal cases. How do you prove whatever she said in an op-ed actually hurt your career? I mean, you write Fantastic Beasts or something they might have been in or something. And especially given his lifetime of drinking and alcohol abuse. I saw some photos of him during the trial, and he looks worse than I do, which is not...
Steven, shut your face. I will not have any self-deprecation.
But so is this what he's not? It seems like his movie star days have perhaps passed him by, but he but Rittenhouse was very adamant about somehow he could, like, and it's very much
the entire reason that he's famous is because, like, he killed people and people thought it was, and other, we thought it was, maybe not a great thing for him to do. He wouldn't be famous if he didn't, he would be famous if like the left was like, oh no, what you did was fine, honey. So, like,
well, I mean,
there's really no reason for
Matt Gaetz and
thank us.
Well, Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert offered him internships. So there's a whole movement upon the right to make him famous or to help him. So than his options would have been before he killed anyone. So it's a sort of, well, you can't, it's sort of like a lot of these cases, it used to be very hard to prove defamation. It was tough, like in the 80s. And some of that's obviously rooted in sexism, misogyny, but like it'd be very hard for Madonna. That was the example that would come up in college cases when I was in school, that for Madonna, because of her reputation, which was bad enough that she could not get it apparently past the co-op board at one point in New York. No one wanted to live with Madonna. So
I would want to live with Madonna.
So would I. I think she'd be perfectly charming. I mean, I don't think she would like put Canadian nickels into the washing machine or something. But yes, that whole case, Rittenhouse really feeling that he has been abused.
Like, in order to have been defamed, no. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you are defamed, I actually don't know. Do you have to prove that, like, it hurt your life in some way?
Yes, by non-legal, this is more from side. You take like common law class in college, but generally it's like they have to prove actual malice.
That I know.
The Fox News benefit was that because this was something after the verdict came out, I was just, as a guy, confused, because it was like, well, how can Amber Heard's she's on the hook for an op-ed in the Washington Post for saying, I mean, Tucker Carlson, like the lies that he says and the defamation, Jesse Waters, I had written about this last week, had really intimated horrible things. Nancy Pelosi's husband was involved in an accident and was charged with a DUI. But like the stuff he was saying that Pelosi hit the driver, which was not the case. That, alluding to all sorts of things that were overtly either untrue and clearly with malice, because the way he's telling it.
Yeah.
So it's just like, but Fox always gets away with the idea that no reasonable people believe this, except for the past president of the United States, who just watched Fox all the time. But they're able to sort of have their cake.
I mean, that's what they literally said for Tucker Carlson. It was like no reasonable person would ever think he's serious, except for our entire audience, which is made up of unreasonable people.
Yeah. Do you think that's an example of somewhat kind of a democratic or sort of white liberal insistence that no reasonable person watches Fox? And their relatives don't really watch it, or no one really, like, it's just only 8 people are watching it.
This is the thing.
And as opposed to the fact that it actually is influencing the nation.
Like, unreasonable people watching it has consequences, as we know. Like, you know, the Buffalo shooter was inspired by shit that Tucker Carlson says. He was an unreasonable person who did something unreasonable and horrible. And that was in line with the kind of lies that they spread, that he believed, the kind of lies that they spread on there. So I don't really like the whole, you know, I don't really like the whole consider the source thing, because no reasonable person would believe this person or that person, because I actually do think it should still count as defamation in those cases, because, you know, who's to decide who is a reasonable person? And I would say a very large percentage of the country is made up of non-reasonable people, and those non-reasonable people vote, make all kinds of decisions, murder people. So, like, I don't know.
Did you ever see the Fisher King, the movie, The Fisher King?
Oh yeah. I mean, a long time ago, but
the entire, not entire gist of it being that Jeff Bridges' character, who was the sort of shock jock, now he'd be sort of a Fox News host.
Oh yeah, he ruined the guy's life or something, right?
Yeah, Robyn Williams' life. Robyn Williams is sort of, his wife was murdered because of listening to him and gotten amped up and and he feels the whole movie is basically about, one, there was immediate, professional, he lost his job, but more, it's not just that. It's more that he literally feels like, oh, I effed up. Look what I did. And I need to make it right. So he's trying to help Robyn Williams' character, who's now not all there, helping him. Yeah. And that isn't like, these guys don't care. Like I said, there's enough of, they're such sociopaths, you can't even do a movie about it. Like, after the Buffalo, they don't care. Even if they lost their job, they would just go on a rant about how they lost their job unfairly. They would never be a moment of like, oh my God, what I've been doing. It is revealing of how kind of singularly awful these folks are.
Yeah.
You were talking about unreasonable people. You were right. By the time this airs, the article would have been in Saturday's Wonkette, but Marjorie Taylor Greene for Christian nationalism.
Yes.
And
Christian nationalism. We're going to convert everyone, and you're going to be fine with it.
She's often, she's clearly but I mention this a lot because Republicans will do their whole thing of like, oh, how do we get here? It's so, we used to be, when the Reagan Revolution, we were just a young folks doing our thing. Bill Kristol had written something similar about that today. And I was, again, this New York Times article about Ginny Thomas, I was reading about her and her mom, who's in with Phyllis Schlafly and everything. And what the rhetoric that they were saying in the mid-70s and in these meetings that these white ladies, that's what they're saying, they sound like Marjorie Taylor Greene. Like, the way they talked about the Ford-Nixon branch of the Republican Party, which then dominated the Republican Party, was like how Marjorie Taylor Greene talks about quote unquote rhinos now. And it, to me, that was very enlightening, because there was such a passion and anger there. Whereas I think for a lot of Democrats, it's just like, well, we need to tamp it down if anything similar happens on our side. But clearly the right never has this. They have ideas. They have, I think Moynihan had said that of like, oh, Republicans have ideas now. Like in the 80s, the former Democratic senator had said that about Republicans. It's like, well, it's all been very angry and regressive and rooted in that. Maybe your friends at the country club were kind of they were front men, but mostly it was also anger and rage. So, and nationalism, Christian nationalism.
I know. And like, this is the thing. It's really hard to, I don't think that she actually knows what Christian nationalism is. Like, I don't think that she knows that. I think that she is in favor of it, but that she doesn't specifically know what it is. Like, she's like, yes, I would like a theocracy. It would be great if everyone was Christian. It would be super great if, everyone loved America. That's clearly what this is about. And I don't know that she's swift enough to like understand why it's bad, which doesn't actually matter. Like, it's not like, oh, the poor thing doesn't know any better. But I actually also think the poor thing doesn't know any better.
Yeah, and she probably doesn't get the history or intricacies of what she's talking about. But at its core, she believes she's a Dalek. So she believes everything different must be crushed and stamped out. There's no room for anything that's different. And that is essentially Christian nationalism. Might not have read the books, but she gets this, like, why should people exist who aren't like us? And that leads us to, so for the past week, a couple of things. One, Joe Biden had mentioned about when they were starting the debate on trying to pass some gun laws and work with Republicans. And we talked about this last week of where they are already doing things like door control or video games and violence.
The new one I got today was Jesse Waters has decided masks actually.
It made everyone. It got everyone
are responsible.
It got the kids. So, and so Biden said, well, Cornyn from Texas, the senator, and McConnell, they're rational people. And when myself and Oliver Willis and some other folks are like, this doesn't make sense, you should never say that, they aren't rational, the adults in the room came out and like, this is all 12th dimensional chess, where he says that and that corners them and ever. It's like, well, that never works. Like, no one likes that level of, one, I don't think Biden is trying to, like, Pelosi sometimes would do shade or whatever, which she would say, oh, I'm, stuff like that. But that's not Biden. He directly says that. And I feel like the average voter, and we've been struggling with the average voter, doesn't like snark. They actually like someone who says what they mean.
Yeah.
Biden ran on no malarkey. So that would also include some shade. It was interesting. I don't know if you recall this. So Pelosi, as some interview, was like, oh, I pray for Trump. And he, at a prayer breakfast, said, F her and her praying for me. She doesn't pray for me. She's trying to get me, impeached, and she hates me, the things she says. And everyone thought like, oh, well, voters respect. Obviously, she doesn't really want to pray for him. She hates him, but they respect that she said it. And Trump was being impolite. He was breaking the country club rules. But the average person is kind of like, no, like, how dare you say, like, that's how any normal person react. Well, how dare you say you're praying for me when you're trying to F you? Like, no one likes the charade of the country club rules. They aren't working.
Yeah.
So yes, actually, so either Biden thinks that these guys are rational, in which he's been in a coma for the past 20 years because McConnell is corrupt, or he was trying to, as someone said, obviously he's being sarcastic, which, okay, that doesn't work. Like, it's best to just say, because all that does is set up. And this is what happened. This was my long lead up to that, because what I warned, I think it was Monday, Memorial Day, when he was saying this, it's like, okay, what you're setting yourself up for is that we're going to have this bipartisan issue Republicans have to do something. They're saying, okay, well, they're going to come out and cry about dead kids and say, okay, well, here's our plan, which is arming teachers, having the schools with one door,
Yeah.
you know, some little, it'll be like some trap doors and moats or something at the school, and that's what we're going to do. And more money for cops, because you have to always put money for cops. And then maybe one thing, like one maybe small like background check thing that wouldn't actually ever be effective, but even the smallest thing, but mostly just a BS GOP thing. And then Democrats, and they did this with police reform. Then they're like, well, this doesn't do anything. It's like, oh, well, you can't, you say you're going to be bipartisan, you can't, and then they leave.
Yeah.
They do this all the time. And McConnell immediately came out saying, well, we're only interested in things for addressing mental health and, so demonizing.
So they're also not interested in addressing mental health. Like they're actually not, like, unless they, just get to have some really trashy asylums to throw people in. Like they don't, when was the last time they wanted to like allow any funding for healthcare? Like,
well, I don't. So let's roll the clocks back, Robyn.
Schools don't even have school nurses. Like,
or these dead kids.
Who
like,
the fuck are they going to be? Oh yeah, they don't have any school nurses, but there will be like enough mental health professionals. They didn't want to pay teachers enough
and teachers don't have. I mentioned this as well. If you're arming teachers, you're not going to give them the sort of get out of accountability free card that cops have. So teachers were like, okay, I'm going to get sued out of oblivion. What if I shoot a kid? What if I, don't respond quickly enough and people die? I'm going to get sued in oblivion. Why would I do this? Like, I'm not a cop and I don't have the protection of being like, I can do whatever I want. F you, that cops have, where no one involved who effed up everything there.
Yeah, teachers don't have qualified immunity.
So no, why would any and it's inherently ableist, because then it's just like, well, I have my no offense, but my son's 90-year-old teacher, I don't know how quick of a draw she might be compared. Why don't I just get the Marine? And it's absurd. It's obviously absurd, right? And as you said, they barely have money for school nurses. They don't.
I mean, can I just say, do you know what happens when they put like cops in schools?
No, yeah.
It's not that shootings are prevented. It's that the kids at the schools get arrested. Like,
it's just encouraging the school to prison pipeline. And it's not like the range kids are actually being captured or processed, because generally speaking, if you just prevented them from getting guns, that would be the preferable option. But instead, you create this situation where these kids, like, what is the mental health? What is McConnell imagining? Or Republicans, they say this, but what does that mean for this particular student? Like this kid who turned 18, and then the guy in Oklahoma, bought guns immediately. Where's the process? Do you have one? Would be, okay, is there a rigorous mental health screening? And I think people might have.
But I also don't think that rigorous mental health screenings are going to screen for bigotry, which half the time that's why they're fucking murdering people. It's not going to screen for, oh, are you mad about women not sleeping with you?
No, I mean, a lot of that stuff you could, but I think Republicans would push back on anything that would.
It's political.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a psychological standpoint, you could probably assemble a test and get a sense of, oh, this person is an incel, should not give this person a gun. But incels are Republicans, so they don't want to essentially, they would say it would be like, oh, you're fine of arming.
Yeah, and then they'd be like, well, no, we want to do things to screen out liberals who are obviously clamoring for guns anyway. They'd be like, why can't, you guys be terrorists too, just because you don't ever, do mass shootings? How is that fair?
Lindsey Graham was saying, schools need to be imprisoned, right? Like prisons. So just like, or to be fair, he's saying like banks, the Capitol building, because the Capitol was so secure. last year, and but obviously there's been school shootings, but the problem is they get a lot of attention, rightly, because children have been murdered. But there's been mass shootings in churches, movie theaters, anywhere. So essentially, do we all have to live in a prison so that people can like hold their guns? It makes no sense.
And, you know, what place is more notoriously safe than a prison?
Yeah, Ted Cruz had a situation where he was yelling at this guy who was talking about how terrible he is, because that should happen whenever Ted Cruz goes out in public. But the guy got pretty close to him. They even took a photo together because Ted Cruz's ego is such that believes that someone wants a photo with him. It's not just an excuse to get close enough to him to yell at him. But, you know, he was in this fancy sushi restaurant with his family. Of course, the restaurant probably had more than one door, lots of windows. The guy got that close to him. And in Texas, where open carry is a thing, there's permitless carry, the guy could have killed him.
Yeah.
And so are we saying like, well, Cruz, you want to live in a world your family can't go to that, should not be able to go out for a sushi dinner because that's inherently unsafe? And your good guy for gun thing would be, by the time any of you have pulled out a gun, something horrible has happened because the bad guy shoots first and has gotten out like 500 rounds. So we're where we are. Prior to recording, I'd sent you a tweet from Rachel Bitcofer, and it was saying about how the only way to pass gun legislation is to really pressure Republicans and who I believe are beyond shame or mercy. I mean, and I'm not trying to both sides this issue, but from a philosophical standpoint, it is almost like saying there's enough pressure and yelling at Christian Gillibrand or Elizabeth Warren that you could get them to vote for a abortion ban. Like, I just need to call her office and tell her that all these babies are dying every year. Now, I want to ban abortion, and they would finally give in. That doesn't make any sense.
Here's the thing. I don't think that it's going to change Republicans at all, but I do think it's like good PR. I think it's good sales. Like, I don't think that Republicans are going to be like, you know what? You're right. And I do care about the children. Because no, they don't give a shit about the children. They will never give a shit about the children.
And it's the same with abortion. You hang that on them, get embarrassed about it. Granted, Republicans really love the whole gun thing. I guess my larger sense would be it seems like both with voting rights and abortion rights, Democrats have gotten themselves in this thing of where they believe that there are 10 reasonable Republicans. They are not. And so they do this. You create this sense of, then it just looks like you are not succeeding and getting reasonable people to your side, other than just saying, these guys are unreasonable. I've got two moles, Manchin and Sinema, who say they support gun safety, say they support voting rights, or in Sinema's case, say she supports abortion rights, but believe in some
not doing anything about any of those things
because of the filibuster is so important. So that's what you have to kind of hammer. The other argument was the idea that we would suddenly win all the Senate races, so we could have 60 votes, which when I say is impossible, people are like, no, we can will it so that we can win Arkansas again. I was like, how? Like, I'm open to ideas, but like, how?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of the things about trying to get DC statehood and I'm all for like maybe taking Portland and making it North Portland and South Portland and getting 4 different senators from there or something. But unless you tweak the rules, the Senate will always have a white conservative bias. Something really we're kind of behind the 8 ball there.
Yeah.
So the best case scenario is that you wind up holding all the Senate seats we have now and flipping Pennsylvania and Ohio, which is going to be a huge stretch. And then that can counter for Manchin and Sinema, and then you could.
I don't understand why we haven't even like tried for DC statehood yet, because
the same problem they did try, but again, you need 60. And
no, I mean, but like,
it all is. There's nothing that can be done. And everyone who says, "Well, you should take a civics class," you know, those charming folks. What they don't, they will argue that everything fell apart when Clinton lost without recognizing that if Republicans had not been prepared to break country club rules, you know, Kavanaugh, Barrett, and Gorsuch would not have been on, they would have been filibustered. But they were able to say, okay, all of us were going to nuke the filibuster, and we're all going to be united. It was only Manchin's, not Manchin, McCain's last minute vote that saved the Affordable Care Act. So if they had been shackled, if Republicans had been somewhat shackled by a Manchin and Sinema block, then, you know, the Supreme Court would not. But it's hard to conceive of that. Like, the courts, ending the lower courts, whatever, because Republicans aren't kind of chomps that way. They'd be like, no, we have power. We're going to use our power. So, but yeah, I mean, the fact that we had more mass shootings, and it's all textbook, and the solution Republicans have is to blame single moms some more and video games, that chestnut.
What I love, and I realize I am far from the first person to say this, is how much like they hate single moms. Single moms cause of all the problems in the world, but also they want more single moms because they want to get rid of abortion, you know, and like,
well, they think that the dads,
my mom and all of the, like, you know, women in the 1980s and 90s were saying that, you know, like they were all saying that because, you know, at the time they were really mad at single mothers, like they are now. But if you hate abortion, shut your face about single mothers. How does, like, you think you're going to like force people to get married? I guess if it's a Christian nationalist country, then
they don't seem to have a shotgun wedding clause to what they're doing to force, because men can still choose to just leave. There's nothing forcing them. It's all on the woman. The woman is pregnant. She's going to have to. It was sort of like the awful. I'm old enough to, like, in the South, there really was an awful period where people did this. You might be shocked, but it was like only if you got a female dog, you would be then you'd spring to have the dog spayed. But no one bothered to neuter a male dog. It's not going to be our problem, which is it's just terrible. But that really was how people were operating, and I think that's what now it's like. Yeah, this is going to be. You know, you can't. God forbid you would say, well, you're going to have to marry her, automatic, or at least, or even saying that the woman, if she has to have the right of first refusal, and saying, you know, gotta have to marry me or not. They have no interest in that.
The weird thing is like how very into the idea of loveless marriages they are. Like they are so into that. They want, like, they don't care if people like one another or love one another. They just want them married. And they'll, like, basically, they don't care if, like, you know, a gay man and a gay woman want to get married to each other, because they're like, that's fine as long as you're just being a man and a woman married to each other. We don't care. And they also, you know, we should also mention they do have it on their agenda to get rid of no-fault divorce, because they don't, like, they just want everyone paired off, and for whatever weird Noah's Ark type reason they have.
Yeah, the more sacrifice, the better. Of course, a lot of the no-fault divorces, men vanished. Like, it would not be uncommon for men to just vanish and their wife, maybe send a couple bucks, but you can't force him to live. I mean, unless he wants to marry again, maybe, but there's no it's again all structured to make it as difficult as possible for women.
Yeah. Oh,
and
exactly. It didn't.
and,
It also that's like just absolutely not. Just absolutely like let's ignore how people are, how people live their lives, and just decide, everyone should just do things our way. There's this one guy who I did not get his name or where he's running because I'm an idiot. But I was just flipping through Twitter. A guy who was like, if you elect me, there will be no more trans people. Like, really? Really? You're just gonna show up to you're gonna become an assemblyman, which I think is what he was running for, and people are gonna suddenly say, you know what? This guy's an assemblyman. I think I'm gonna rethink my entire personal identity just for him to brighten his day. They're fucking delusional.
Well, they want to make it as difficult as possible as people. They'll either go away, they'll either die or go into a closet or something, and it's not a reasonable thought process. And it's not but I think people really love to suffer. I've known some folks they'll be the couple that've been married for a very, very long time, and if someone gets divorced, like I said, they will make, it's not so much that they got through the bad time together. It's not like, oh, we sat through and worked it out. It's more of like, I sucked up this crappiness. Like, oh, she left because her husband was cheating on her. Well,
I stuck around because I'm good.
Yeah, like you want credit just for existing. Kind of like some folks are giving to the Queen. So the Queen has been around for 70 years.
I love how mad you are at the Queen.
I love the Queen. I love the Queen. I love Queen Elizabeth. But one thing I've noticed is that since Meghan
Markle
came involved, there's a sense of, you get like with Ben Shapiro talking about how great Prince Philip was, and that she apparently killed Prince Philip because he, was a man of great, giving to his country and everything, and to have to see his grandson in this situation devastated him and so forth. But everyone's been suddenly embracing, a lot of the worst people in the world, because of Meghan Markle, have been embracing the monarchy. It was essentially a very white supremacist kind of concept. Oh yeah, obviously.
No, neo-monarchists is a new thing, or not a new thing, but it's a thing. Yeah.
And I mean, so the whole history, I mean, you have someone, the whole reason Diana didn't work out is that she actually wanted to care, like hugging people with AIDS and going out and trying to connect with people and giving others, like whatever.
Yes, the people's princess, if you will.
Yes, exactly. And obviously not a perfect person, but was sort of defiantly flawed in ways that the role, if you read the stuff, the idea is that we show no emotion, we show no flaws, we kind of are the perfection for the average people to aspire to, which is of course inherently effed up, but people tend to now dig that a lot. Yes. But just the idea of like oh, well, she's been the queen for, or she's been obviously royalty for almost 100 years, the queen for 70 years, and we need to thank her for existing.
For queening. I could be queen. I would be a really good queen. I have many tiaras.
Yeah, but you have feelings and thoughts, right?
Yeah.
And you communicate, and you would be. Yeah, you've got a lot of Meghan and Di problems, right? Like they have opinions about things, and
I mean, it would depend on how awesome the crown was. No, I mean, I have always compared myself to Princess Diana. Can I say, like, do you remember on Passions when there was like an entire Sheridan's whole storyline for a while was just like, I was super best friends with Princess Diana. I'm just going to talk about Princess Diana all the time. It was great, and oh God, that show was gorgeous in its terribleness.
I loved Passions.
Yeah.
It was just it was insane. It was a period of where like you really had a
Yeah.
but I mean every soap opera. I mean every but this is
You never get to like the J.E. Riley, mwah,
yeah.
her
This is
levels of perfection anymore. He
crazy.
did Possessed Marlena. He did on Days. He did Passions. That man was a beautiful, beautiful genius.
Yeah, and the market for daytime soaps was interesting. I mean, I presume it was apparently always supposed to be suburban housewives, right? And it was just this idea what entertains them is kind of astonishing to me. Like it was just the most bizarre stuff.
Well,
I just love it.
one thing I actually think is like on a more serious note, it's kind of disappointing that, in a way that soap operas aren't what they were, because they actually were in certain ways a vehicle for like radical change to some degree, like, because, they had gay people on way early. They had like a lot of it was a really good way, I think, for like in certain ways in terms of, getting that audience to be more accepting. Although there was an extremely transphobic storyline on Passions towards the later seasons. It was like a murderer person who was.
Was it like the trans person, sort of like either Science of the Lambs or Michael Caine
but
film?
I think they were like Julian's real child or something. Oh, okay. I remember it was Julian and Eve's real child, I think. Oh my God. And then they were going around murdering everyone in Salem is I think the story about, I think their name is Vincent.
Yeah. There's a whole thing with that, like the trans panic was fascinating. So when they would either just sort of want to mock trans women, it's usually they would get him, overtly a man and put him in a wig dress or something and do that. But often they would have, when on the occasions they would cast, say, a woman, a cis woman as a trans woman, it would be for the twist. So there's tons of where it's like it's a twist and the person's horrified and use it. Jen Richards, the trans woman, she did a documentary for Netflix, which is great. Disclosure, which goes into the number of film that there's a whole section of like men getting physically sick when they discover they're with a trans woman, and it's like really horrifying to see how often that trope is visited or how often violence is justified. The Crying Game, he punches her, and the other films, the guy punches the woman when he finds out that she's trans. So that is disturbing. Nip Talk, which is also insane, but its sexual politics were very weird. I never watched the show, but they had one of the big bads was Famke Janssen, who was then revealed to have been a trans woman, and it is overtly transphobic, the storyline. So it is very weird to watch in retrospect. It's kind of like yikes. And there's the presumption that a gay man is going to necessarily not be transphobic is just is a weird one. So we're often guilty of.
Yeah. Although what's his face, the guy Ryan Murphy did go on to actually do, I thought, a pretty good a couple pretty good storylines on Glee with trans characters.
I never watched much of Glee, so I was pleased that to hear that he
like it was just very regular. I thought, like, there was the episode where it was like, I'm actually a man, this woman, or I'm gonna the football coach a trans man, and it was handled really well, I thought. You know, it was just like, okay, here's the episode where we all learn, and then it's over. You know.
No, that is great. Now the I don't know if you watched much of the top of the structure. One of the things was the structure was that the handsome partner was not particularly the most talented. It's kind of coasting on his looks and coasting on his relationship with the very obviously talented and brilliant.
I saw the first episode. So you're talking about the hot guy with black hair.
Yes. Well, originally it was both. I think even scripted, but they didn't go this route only because Julie McMahon came in and was very talented. They originally really, because it's set in Miami, they were going to have the hot guy be a Latino actor. They wanted to cast a Latino actor as the one who is not as talented as his white partner and is coasting on his looks.
Not good. No.
Yeah. It's like, yikes. Like, and Christian Troy, essentially. So if anyone knows the show, knows Christian Troy, the idea that Christian Troy would have been Latino and Sean McNamara would still been white would have been a really problematic choice. And the fact that really was going to be the choice. Also the idea that the son, Sean's son would have obviously been Latino, sort of making it very obvious that his wife had fooled around with his best friend. So yeah, there's often those things of where you was kind of wonder, it's like, wow, that's really but this is things that are either be overtly racist or overtly sexist in certain things. And you don't, like, if you were deliberately trying to do it, it's almost like that, okay, that's an intent and wrong or whatever. But when it's like you're not even aware of it, it almost seems worse because it's like it's so like it's like not in your consciousness to like think that, what am I doing? What do I think about the roles of, you know, of minorities or women in the world? But
yeah, I don't know. I consider watching it sometimes because, you know, I do respect your taste in things, but also I faint at the sight of blood. So I'm not sure.
I mean,
I can watch it on TV.
It's hard.
Yeah. It's like really graphic surgery, right? That they show.
They do it on time. Yeah. It's interesting. There are times, I don't know if you're this way as well, of like, someone will say, oh, you were into this or you like this show, should I see it? You don't recommend it because it's kind of like, well, you know,
it's of its time.
It's of its time. I was like 20, you know, something. Yeah. I saw, like, so I can't put you in that time. It's like a lot of 80s music. It was like, I can't bring you back to, like, you know, although Catch Me I'm Falling, like Pretty Poison, I feel like that's a perfect song, and I try to expose people to it because it is actually a perfect song. And I often fail, but there are certain songs I was like, I feel like this is perfect beyond the period and the time. It is so 80s or so whatever is perfect. Another unrelated question. I was talking to my wife about this. So how do you refer to the first decade of like the 20s? Do you call it the aughts or the millennium or?
Yeah, I mean, I say like the aughts or like the 2000s. You know, well, they're all calling it Y2K now, which I'm like, oh my God, are we calling it that again? Because that was like so embarrassing. The Y2K bug. They're all it's actually scary to me a little bit that it's all like now it's like vintage. And I'm like,
did you have like the 2000 glasses for?
Yeah, no, I never had that.
They kept them, like, obviously too, but they would be a point after two. Like, someone tried them at 2010. It's like, well, no, this design is only going.
Yeah, that doesn't work.
You've got it until 2009 is the last time. You got to cash in or whatever. Yeah. So I asked because, especially growing up in the 80s, the 60s was very clearly defined. So you'd have like parents, you know, you'd have teens who are very 80s and their parents be like, say, around my age, who are of the 60s. And it's a very clearly cultural concepts, especially if you want to stereotype the 60s with like flower power, so 1967, and then
Which
1980.
was, also a very small amount of people.
Yes, exactly. But there was something you could play a song, or you could play, if you want to establish the 60s in a movie, you could play a song or do whatever. And even though a similar amount of time has passed, it's been 20 years since 2002, is there like, how do you define that decade? Is there a song that makes you, oh, I'm in Y2K again? Or is there
okay, so
so yeah, you would know.
Actually no, it was 2000. There's this restaurant that my sister and I go to that like apparently only plays music from like 2010 to 2012, and it's like all Katy Perry and Taylor Swift, and we're like, wow, this is a time. There's some Carly Rae Jepsen thrown in there, Ashley Simpson. No, Ashley Simpson was like pre that. But here's the thing, like during the 2000s, I was more of, this is going to be very shocking to you, but I was a little bit more of an indie rock chick. As they used to call, I was a hipster, I guess. I hate that word. But people would have said that. I hate it so much. But so I wasn't really doing the whole Paris Hilton, Britney Spears thing. So I think that's more representative of the era for a lot of people now, rather than like, white belts and skinny jeans, because skinny jeans never went out of style. Happy to bring white belts back. No.
Yeah. I guess I remember like Outcast, or in the sense of going to I was more inclined during that decade, 2000. I met my wife towards the end of that decade, but I was more inclined to be in a bar and hearing certain. So that's kind of also, I remember like, okay, there was Outcast, and it was the Strokes at one place, Village and stuff like that. And so I've kind of got a feel of what that is, I guess. But
I think for a long time, and just like speaking from my, like I worked in a vintage store for a long time, so I have like a pretty good sense of a lot of that stuff. They're really, I would say, starting in like 1995, there stopped being a lot of like universal aesthetics. Like at first it was all like extremely divided. I would say like everyone had their, like there were a bunch of like late 90s, early 2000s, everyone had like a bunch of like different cliques and these different groups dressed in their specific way. Like you had ravers, they were wearing big pants. You had like alternative chicks wearing ringer tees and carrying lunch boxes and what have you. Then you move into the 2000s, and I think it actually became, things stopped being so. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my head together here. You into the 2000s, things like stopped being as super divided, except for the fact that you had like mainstream culture and then alternative culture, and that was really like two of the. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm like really trying to explain this, and I'm not doing it very well. But during the 2000s, there was like a huge amount of pressure to have this and have that. And that's one thing that I would really like in terms of fashion. If you didn't have this, you were out of style. And that was also very much the same thing in the 90s and in the 80s. I think we did get to a point fashion-wise, though, starting around 2005, where that became very much less of a thing. Like it stopped being a thing where it was like, oh, if you are wearing this, then you're totally out of style, because people just started wearing whatever the hell they wanted. Like I said, skinny jeans never went out of style because people liked wearing them. That millennial pink color was the color of every season for several years. Like that was the main color that you saw when you went into a store. And I think that people sort of just decided, like there's less of a unified aesthetic because people were just kind of decided, I'm going to do what I want. And so there are a few things that were like, trends or that were in style at the time. But I think that people just kind of got very, very tired, especially from the 90s, where it was like people would yell at you if they thought you were wearing high waters, if you were wearing the wrong cut of jeans, and it was exhausting. I think that there was a reaction to that where everyone was just like, no, I'm going to wear whatever the hell I want and I don't care. And I'm going to keep wearing things even if they're not in style. And I like the fact that for years, there has not been a kind of jeans that are out of style.
Yeah. And there's sort of you were mentioning Carly Rae Jepsen, and I'm at that age in my late 40s where you just think, oh, that's part of the new music kids like, even though it's about a 10-year-old song or a big song.
Yeah.
And there was something sort of youthful nostalgia. So like, if you remember being in your early 20s when it was like, oh, the music from like when I was at my first dance is like, even though it's only about like 7 years old. So for me, it's this weird idea of having to accept that there are like 20 somethings out there now who's like, oh, remember this from our first dance? And it's like Uptown Funk or something. Like, wait, didn't that come out?
They're all finding out about Kate Bush now, so.
Yeah.
My sister keeps telling me that she's like, Robyn, they're finding out about Kate Bush because I am well known to be a big Kate Bush fan.
She's great, yeah, and I think she got because her song was in a TV show,
Stranger Things,
right?
And it's running up that hill. Gia also swears that some of the people on TikTok, which I don't pay enough attention to, were saying that they liked the original version by Placebo better. But I don't know if she's just telling me that the original version because they thought Kate Bush was new.
Well, that is,
and I don't know if that's actually true, but if it is, I find it very entertaining.
It would not surprise me. It was like it is sort of, it would not surprise me. But yeah, it is hard to, again, the 20, I don't feel as if like there's this struggle between folks of young people of this decade and young people of the others. I'm just trying to deal with so many of my college friends having kids going to college in the fall. It's a weird, especially the ones of them who are going to the college we went to. So it's a sort of,
wow.
Yeah. So it's like, what else? So I guess next week is the Tonys, right? So we're going to figure out, we're going to do a special Tony broadcast with, ideas of who's going to win or whatever. I believe this is going to be very important to a lot of people.
Yes. You guys are going to really like it and enjoy it and watch it with your faces. And you're going to be like, oh, wow, I care very deeply on Robyn and Steven's hot takes on the Tonys. And this way, the show will be so much more enjoyable to me, a person who is definitely going to watch the Tonys anyway. I am also trying to convince Steven to do a duet with me.
I'm not the singer you are. I think you might have to do your own. What is there? What is the big? I confess, because I was so distracted by the show that disappointed me so much. But what is the big?
I'm going to say Strange Loop, which is fabulous. I'm very excited for that. I'm also very excited about 6, which did not get as many nominations as I would personally like, because it's more of an ensemble, so there's not like a clear like lead or anything like that. So that's disappointing. I'm very excited about 6 though, and I'm dying to see it in person.
I am. I'm going to be in New York later this month, but for a few days, and then some of New England, as I mentioned. But we're most likely just going to do one show, Hamilton, because our son wants to see it. He loves it. So of Hamilton, he's very excited about that. And we're seeing a friend of ours who lives in New Jersey now, and he's been saying everything's legal in New Jersey. It's like, yes, well, he's very happy.
My sister's in New Jersey right now.
Yeah. Yes. If you're going to eventually wind up back in Chicago, I think I will be there in September.
Oh, I'll be there by then. I'll be there in a couple weeks.
Right.
I keep putting it off and everything, but
my wife and I are very excited. We just need to find someone to, make sure our son doesn't die. So because
It'll be exciting. We'll get Jamie to come down from Wisconsin, maybe even.
Oh yeah, it'll be a whole big reunion, and we'll go someplace.
Yes.
Something.
We'll get to like witness my glory in person. It will change your life.
It definitely will. But what?
Usually I didn't think you'd be that tall. Which
no, I'm never shocked by height, right? Like I comprehend. But forgive me with some other personal question, but like, so you've been away from Chicago for a while, but you didn't move your place.
No. I mean, I still have my apartment. I just renewed my lease. Like I'm still there. It's just, I stayed with my family through COVID, and then things happened, and
but you're
yeah,
it'll be an easy landing of going back because you still have your place and everything. So
yeah,
but
no, I'm good.
I love Chicago. It's a cool city. You don't seem very Chicago-like. You do seem very New England. And
I think I grew up in New England, and then Rochester. But
yes, I don't. What does it mean to be Chicago? There's like a very long, but you have a sort of a charming New England quality to you.
Am I quaint?
Well, there's usually more like stories about like you'd be the character you meet and then like main village, and you're sort of the.
Hold on, wait. You meet me in the main village, and then I do what? Do I solve murders?
Yes, exactly. Played by Mercedes Rule or something.
Oh my God! Excuse me, I was being. Sir, who do you think I was being in that? Obviously, I was being Tony Lifetime Achievement Award winner.
Angela Lansbury. Yes, I was casting in the update. I was casting you as I was thinking more on a different aspect than the English lady. But yes, you do have a very nice Angela Lansbury-ness as well.
Yes, I like to think so. I'm very quaint, and I seem like I probably eat a lot of Pepperidge Farm. I had a friend who just would always like do the Pepperidge Farm remembers to me, and I'm like, I don't even talk like that. But
no, that is certainly true. Well, this is not yet your birthday, but when it happens, I presume there'll be clams involved, and some Joy will.
Actually, I think we're going to go to Dinosaur Barbecue, which is glorious. They have fried green tomatoes with cheese and bacon and shrimp on them.
Wow.
Which I think is all anyone needs in their face ever.
That's a wonderful thing. So I'm very, yes, I'm glad you were born. I'm glad you have another, what do they call it? The son. So everyone say nice things about your
nothing mean about the fact that like I rambled a lot. I'm having a day today. Well, so
it happens. So thank you, Robyn. Thank you, everyone. We'll
thank you, Stephen, and thank you, everyone.